All right.
All right, welcome back. This is episode 4 of Chasing Whiskey. I'm Terry,
I'm James.
and today we have glasses and another bottle. And
Yes. What's the surprise today? What bottle?
so you had a question last week.
Yeah,
What was your question?
What is bourbon? Is bourbon even a whiskey?
Right, and so normally we have the next bottle here, but I didn't tell you. I brought us a bourbon.
Very cool.
Elijah Craig. So yes, bourbon is whiskey, but not whiskey is not bourbon. And I bought Elijah Craig for a couple of reasons. One, because it was on sale. You know me, I like a good sale. But more importantly, there's a couple of stories, origin stories about bourbon. And one of them is that Elijah Craig actually was the sort of one of the potential inventors of bourbon. And and so he was a Baptist minister in the South and charred some new oak barrels and threw in some spirits. And people say that was the beginning of bourbon.
Okay.
And there's some other stories as well.
I've heard about the charring of barrels just to see what it was like.
Yeah.
So this is the dude.
I don't know if it's that or it's named after him, but regardless, it was on sale, right? So, but yeah.
So I'm expecting this to be very good. I mean,
I'm hoping it's good.
Bears his name.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that's So why don't we pour? And we can...
Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
Right.
Very good. Okay.
And so I can tell you a little bit more about bourbon because I actually learned, even though I knew last week
that had a nice pop.
It did have a nice pop. I knew last week that bourbon was whiskey, but I actually did a little research and I learned a bit. I like the bottle. The bottle's really nice. It,
Now you know the one thing that I
the size of this?
not don't like about the bottle, but the missing
tube or box.
It's gotta have a package. I mean, I know that's against even environment, but it just adds.
I know. Anyway, let's start out.
That is a nice bottle, though.
It is a nice bottle. And
if you're just getting the bottle, that's not a bad bottle.
That's a big, heavy pour on my side. And it is embossed with the year, the date. I didn't mean to pour that much, but maybe I did subconsciously. So what do you think of the color? So first of all, bourbon tends to be a little darker, apparently, because of the charring. It's
very caramelly.
Yeah, it's absolutely a lot more. It's darker than anything else we've had, isn't it? And I wonder if that's the charring that's doing that, but it's way darker, right?
So we'll have to try another bottle and see if the color is consistently.
With bourbons? Yeah. What do you think of the smell?
Or if you guys know, feel free to
let us know.
Share.
Yeah. What do you think of the smell?
It smells nice. It's sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet, but it definitely has some vanilla notes or some caramel notes. Yummy.
I mean, I've had bourbon before.
Yeah.
I really haven't had a bourbon I didn't like, so it fits my sweet palate.
Well, let's give it a taste. Cheers. Boop. So to be a bourbon, there's actually 6 things. What do you think? Ooh, that's really nice. I really taste the caramel. Do you taste caramel? Or am I haven't gotten flavors in your...
I haven't gotten there yet. It's very pleasant. We talked about water. It's got that bit of a harshness that may...
Very back end.
Yeah, may...
It's not that strong. I think it's only 40, isn't it? Oh, it's 47. So
it may benefit from a little water, and I have a surprise coming for a future episode. Okay. It's in the mail.
Something's in the order, is it? Yeah, so 6 things to make something a bourbon. So first thing, bourbon is only made in the USA, just like Scotch is only made in Scotland. Bourbon is American, so that's interesting.
Very strong legs on that.
Yeah, it really sticks to the glass, doesn't it? It's made with 51% corn. Again, they have to be new charred oak barrels. So a lot of whiskeys are actually aged in older barrels, whether they be port barrels, sherry barrels, even bourbon barrels. They have to be new charred oak barrels, which I found really interesting. I didn't know that.
It's
I knew it was
interesting that
charred,
there's
but I didn't know it had to be
rules.
new. Yeah, there's rules that actually make it a bourbon, right? If it's not that, it's not a bourbon. It's still a whiskey. It's not a bourbon. And then there's a couple others that have to do with the percentage of alcohol, when it's bottled, and that kind of thing. So it has to be distilled at no more than 160 proof, which is 80% alcohol. It has to be entered the aging barrel that has been newly charred, or new charred barrel, at no more than 120% or 120 proof,
Okay.
which is like, what is that, 62% alcohol or 60% alcohol. And then it has to be bottled at no less than 80 proof, so 40%. So this one's 47. So very interesting. So those are the 6 things that make it a bourbon.
And is there a requirement on the number of years that it has to age? I think
2 years.
Is it 2?
Yeah.
I thought it was 3. But
No. Well,
what do you guys say?
that's what I've researched. It said 2 years. It has to age in the barrel for 2 years. So even though in the bottle here it says that Elijah Craig, father of bourbon, he was the first to char oak barrels. And then
So is this the name of the
True.
distillery or the whiskey?
the answer is yes, probably both.
I mean, it's Elijah Craig all over it, even on the top.
Yeah,
That's quite nice on the...
Yeah, the top is actually really nice. Here, I'll show you guys without spilling it. I don't know if you can see that or not, or if there's enough light up there, but it's actually engraved on the top. And the cork is actually really nice. It's like really thick. It's a beautiful bottle, even though it didn't come in a tube or a box. But yeah. So there.
I think it's a nice addition to
Surprise.
the... yes, thank you.
Cheers.
This is great hobby.
Mm. So what do you think? What do you think of the taste?
The harshness that I spoke of with that first drink is gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's your palate gets used to it, or if it off-gasses the...
Oh, I don't know. I never thought about the off-gassing. I just assumed we got used to it, right? So,
or maybe it just needed a minute to breathe.
yeah, maybe.
But yeah, I would definitely sit down and enjoy this.
Yeah, it's nice. What do you? Is there any flavors
Taste?
that are coming forward? Yeah.
I taste vanilla and coconut. I'm just...
They all
it's
say
always
that.
vanilla and coconut.
That's a safe bet, except probably with bourbon. I don't taste coconut at all, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have coconut. And surprisingly, I can't cheat because there's no
So we don't even
no tasting
know.
notes on the bottle. No, we may have to do a little research. Maybe we'll have to do a little.
Maybe
little,
somebody can just tell us
Yeah,
what
exactly.
what notes it is.
Yeah. Have you had this? Do you like it? Do you prefer a bourbon over a whiskey or a scotch of sorts? What's interesting about the Elijah Craig as well is that's actually Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And so it actually has to be made in Kentucky to be considered Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. It has to be both bottled and distilled.
Okay, so there's bourbon,
and then
U.S.
there's Kentucky bourbon, which is like the root of where bourbon originally came from. But you can make a bourbon in Maine or California. It doesn't matter. It could be anywhere in the U.S.
We could make a bourbon here in East Coast of Canada.
No, we can't.
But it just won't be called
It
bourbon.
won't be bourbon. It'll be whiskey, right? But if we drive an hour, yeah. So it has to be made in America. But this is actually Kentucky straight bourbon. So
That's okay, because I think we have our rye, and the U.S. doesn't.
Well, you know what? Maybe that's next week's question.
Yes.
What makes something a rye?
What's a rye?
Yeah. You know what? You can research that one and figure
Okay.
it out. Because rye, I can tell you right now, is something that's growing up was always around the house at Christmas. There was always a relative that brought a rye or had a rye.
Feels
or
like a
my
Canadian
mother had to go
thing.
get a rye for the uncle or whatever that always liked to have a rye at Christmas. So
Because I think it's rye whiskey.
it is whiskey. Yeah. I'll answer that question right now. It is a whiskey. Just like bourbon's a whiskey. So I knew the answer to that.
Okay.
I know the answer to the rye. What really excited me this week more than anything, it's some little things, right? So this is pretty premature in our journey of learning whiskeys and understanding whiskeys and chasing them. But I was at the liquor store buying this and the other bottle, and some guy was walking back and forth saying, do you know where this particular brand is, that particular brand is? And I'm like, oh, I think that's American. Come over here. And I showed him exactly where it was. And like, I know almost nothing, right? Like, but the only thing I do know is that when I went and researched a few little things about bourbon, I learned
Right.
about a few other made in America whiskeys that aren't actually bourbons. And the other thing about this, it's the first whiskey brought into Chasing Whiskey that's spelled with an E, because it's American. So if you remember on your, it was the first episode or second episode, you described what it was with an E or without an E. And because it's made in the US of A, it is with an E. So again, it's not where it is, it's the country of origin.
And it's actually spelled wrong.
It's
whiskey
it's
with
spelled,
an E.
It's spelled properly because it was made in the US. Right. Which I thought, yeah, that's cool. It's the first one we have here that's actually spelled with an E.
At least they drive on the correct side of the road.
Well, this is true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty good. Look at the color of that. It's so caramelly. All right, I suggest...
so any notes you're going to...
I taste caramel. I smell
whiskey.
There's definitely a toasted, and maybe it's the char. I don't know.
How's the finish to you?
Really smooth.
It's just beautiful.
It is. It is really nice.
Okay, so maybe we'll have our second drink and talk about our rating.
Yeah, and you know what we should do? We should take a little break. Not that you guys are going to notice, and actually read what it would have said for tasting notes.
Mm-hmm.
Because normally we read the bottle or the box or whatever, and this is one thing that Elijah Craig is lacking.
I gotta say, from someone that wants to learn about the whiskey, I like having the packaging
100%
with
agree.
the map
100%.
and the notes.
I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. Okay. So let's. I'll let you pour another glass, and I'm actually going to research.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
What the tasting notes are. So it says on the site that the award-winning bourbon that started it all, our signature small batch, owes its distinctive warm spice and subtle smoke flavor to level 3 charred oak barrels, handcrafted by our master distillers.
What's a level 3?
I don't know. Okay. So here's some good notes. So it's saying that on the nose, there's vanilla, caramel, nut, and oak pop out. And I did taste or smell for sure caramel. And I also said I had a bit of a toasted. No, toasted what? Like, it's not a toasted marshmallow, but maybe that's the oak. Right? And sweet and light at first, these flavors slightly intensify with time in the glass, which you noted. Right?
But I don't get the nuts.
I don't either. We're still children. But it says it's healthy amounts of oak and vanilla dominating with caramel. So I tasted that for sure. Oak? I don't know what oak tastes like. You ever need an oak? I mean, we're Canadian, but we're not beavers. I don't know.
It's a truly noble animal, though.
It is a truly noble animal.
Cheers to the beaver.
And then on the finish, they said cinnamon and oak aftertaste. Cinnamon, I don't taste cinnamon. Not at all. Again, it says aftertaste. There's a heat.
It matches your shirt, actually. Nice shirt.
You. Oh, nice watch.
Oh, thank you.
There's a heat to it, but I wouldn't call it cinnamon. And maybe that's the 47%, but it's not cinnamon to me. And maybe
when you say that, though, I like a cinnamon heart. Like, this is not a cinnamon. There's just
the aftertaste of a cinnamon heart. So it's not the flavor of cinnamon.
It's not a fireball or anything.
It's the aftertaste of having cinnamon, which has that heat in your mouth. That is there. For sure, for sure, for sure. 100%.
The heat of the cinnamon.
Yeah. So
how's that for a sophisticated
palate?
Yeah.
After reading the notes, absolutely. But yeah, that's what I would call that. There's no flavor of cinnamon at all, but the heat of having had cinnamon, or a cinnamon heart specifically, I would agree. So, and it says it has a good job of lingering long after the sip, and I would agree with that too. So
since you bought this, I have no idea what it costs.
Yeah. So would you buy it again?
Absolutely.
Would you want to have it on your shelf?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this is. I'm starting to see how my shelf would evolve.
Yeah.
And
no tube, no box. But I think they look good unboxed and not in a tube. As much as I appreciate the tube.
Yeah,
and
I
box,
mean, I get rid
on
of
the shelf. I like it.
I get rid of the packaging.
I don't think I'd get rid of it. I think I'd put it down below. Which is exactly what I've done here, by the way. Right below me. There's the packaging.
Because
that is beautiful. Like, look at that.
That's a good looking
That's a good looking bottle.
We've got a collection going.
We do have a collection.
We said we needed 3 bottles to have a collection. Now we have 4.
Yeah, we have a mature collection.
As we continue, and if we keep branching out, I could see our collection taking shape. It'd be nice to have, like, okay, we've got a selection of bourbon, a selection of rye, a selection of scotch, a selection...
And Japanese whiskey or two. I'd like to try one of those.
Fantastic.
I don't know if I've ever tried a Japanese whiskey, and I've heard they've actually won awards and everything. I don't think I've ever even tried one. So
yes,
maybe maybe before we go to the final 10, we should at least try at least one Japanese whiskey.
That's a good idea. At least
the rye, at least an Irish, and at least a Japanese. So
we embrace diversity.
Yes, there you go.
Whiskey. Absolutely.
I think that's a good idea, actually.
Okay.
So we've had 3 scotches. So now we need to throw in a rye and an Irish.
See, this is it's almost more fun having a structure to like.
I think so.
A framework for your exploration. So yeah, very good. So did we decide if? So I said absolutely.
You said you would buy it again. I would absolutely buy it again.
Right.
I'm very impressed. I like it a lot. I think it looks great on the shelf. I think it tastes delicious. I think it's something you could introduce to someone who isn't even familiar with whiskey. I think it's not overpowering, even though it's strong alcohol, 47%. It doesn't have that kind of bite to it that something in the upper, in the 50s does. And surprisingly, it's under $50.
What?
It was like $49.95, and that's not on sale. So what do we need to know for next week?
So for next week, we know we're going to do a rye. So stay tuned for a rye, and that'll be my surprise to bring, and what a rye is. Too.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Good.
And we also need a tip. So Terry, do you have any tips?
I don't know. I think your idea of getting a journal to start journaling our flavors, our notes, that kind of stuff is good. I don't think the first few are going to be very, very good, but I think actually documenting what you liked, what you haven't liked, is probably a good
I'm looking
tip.
forward to that.
And if you're starting out, I would say think of flavor profiles you really enjoy.
Well, in my very first exposure to Scotch was something that I didn't like, and even the smell was off for me. So
you might have thought you never liked it. You might have never tried it again.
I was against the whole Scotch isn't for me.
Like Scotch, yeah. If you want to venture in and dip your foot into whiskey, look for something that you actually enjoy today. Whether that's marshmallow or vanilla or sweet, or maybe it is earthy and peaty, and maybe you have an affinity to those kinds of flavors. Anyway, what do you think? Cheers?
To quality of life.
Cheers.